Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Hunger Response Impact Visit webinar. My name is Gwen Ichinose Bagley, and I have the honor of serving as the Youth Development Officer for the YMCA of Greater Seattle. Our nation has not been a stranger to hunger, and the COVID-19 pandemic has raised the crisis to a new level as many youth, families, and seniors face hardships around food scarcity and hunger. And our response to ensure communities have access to food in new ways matters more now than ever when we continue to see hunger rates rise. This work is critical, and the need for sustainable funding is great to meet the needs of all who are impacted by food scarcity and hunger. Currently, we rely on the generosity of donors and partners like Luam, who is the owner of Mojitos, and together we served meals to seniors, like Microsoft, that at the height of the pandemic helped us serve over 37,000 meals over a 10-week period, and our longstanding partner of United Way of King County, who helped us pivot to serve meals in new ways to youth and families during this pandemic. And together with our partners, both those who have been together for a while and our new partners, we are continuing to find creative ways to meet the demand during this difficult time. The national headlines and our local headlines are devastating for people who work in the food scarcity field, but we are hopeful to continue to push forward and close the hunger gap. I'd like to share a story from one of our staff that received a phone call from a mom who was clearly upset and a bit frantic about her situation because she didn't know how she was going to feed her children over the next several days. She had spent the extra money that she had in the past week for breakfast and lunch that kids would normally have received when school was in session, and her dollars just didn't stretch that far, and she didn't know what to do. Our staff responded first just to assure her that we would help her find access and connect her with other organizations. And we learned that she lived in an area where one of our partner sites delivered meals. And so we were able to help connect her with meals that very same day, as well as set her up with some extra meals, provide her food boxes from the food bank. That is just one of the many calls that we receive from families in desperate needs, and they are still happening today. At this time, I would like to introduce you to the team at the Y that supports this work, and you'll be hearing from a few of them during our time together. So Courtney Whitaker is the AVP of Youth Development, and Nicole Lau is our Program Executive for Hunger Response, and Dallas Wood, who's our Director of Hunger Response. And these individuals are champions when it comes to this work. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Nicole, who will be sharing with you a little bit more about our program. Nicole is the program executive for our hunger response programs for the YMCA and food programming efforts with other Ys across the nation as part of her role with YUSA as a regional facilitator. Nicole has 10 years of experience working in food insecurity and supporting staff and programs in providing access to meals for youth. She is passionate about ensuring all youth are set up to reach their fullest potential, whether this is through gaining access to food to fuel their brains, working with other partners and organizations to start food programming efforts, or providing a community meal so communities can eat together. Nicole?
Thank you so much, Gwen, for that wonderful introduction. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about what hunger looks like in our county and our state. The first fact that you see on this slide, it is important because we know two things. That first, if a child is hungry, then the whole family is hungry. And as adults try to shield the children from skipping meals, they often eat less or go hungry themselves. And then second, it's because of the impacts of hunger on kids, which I'll go into a little bit later. The second bullet on this slide, talking about food insecurity, and just to define that, as so we're on the same field as everybody, is food insecurity is really when someone has limited or uncertain access to food. And so it could look like your neighbor down the street purchasing groceries at the beginning of the month, but then by the middle of the month, that food is gone and they don't have the ability to buy additional groceries to get them through the rest of the month. And so that person would be food insecure. The third bullet point talks to our entire state, and knowing that each of our children are in need of additional food assistance, and knowing that in families where there is hunger, the child hunger is very prevalent. The piece for this particular point that I want to point out is just that this only captures a piece of the kiddos who are in need of free and reduced lunches. We also need to look at the larger picture, as we have heard and we know that the student lunch debt is also a huge issue as well, which is something that isn't captured in that number. And then lastly, the piece of this is just the staggering numbers of youth when it comes to summertime and schools are closed. And we know that schools are all closed right now. Just the amount of hunger that can end up happening to a kiddo. So some kids may be really excited about their summer breaks and their plans, while others are nervous and trying to figure out where they're going to get food over the summer. So in this next slide, you can see on the left-hand side that we have a graph for you that shows hunger broken down in King County. So this is very specific. And you can see that there's a rise as we have hit the pandemic in households needing some basic food. This increase is not going to stop. You will likely continue to see this increase for some time. But I also want to point out on this left-hand graphic that you can see the prevalence in South King County of food insecurity and households needing benefits. And then you can see pockets of hunger in North King County as well. So really in any part of our county, everyone is in need. On the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see the graph that shows race and ethnicity disparities, and it's staggering and appalling. And unfortunately, this is from 2016, and right now it doesn't show the dramatic disparities and gaps that are happening right now with our pandemic. So as the pandemic hit, we have seen the disparities continue to increase at 2 to 3 times the rate than their white counterparts. So our communities of color are in need, and they need us to step up and support them now. So lastly, I'll just say that while families have access to basic food, we see that on the graph on the left-hand side. We know that we have a lot to do with our communities of color to ensure that they are not receiving, or that the disparities are being met. And we need to know that the supplemental nutrition programs that we offer are offered at a rate at $5 a day per person. So that would mean about $1.66 per meal per person, and they get 3 meals a day is just $5 a day. So I just want you to think a little bit about how far would $5 get you in one day for food. So to delve a little bit deeper on the effects of food insecurity in children, we know that this can be something that is very hard for us to focus when we're hungry. You know, try and think about the last time that you've been hungry, and we know that the term hangry is something that's thrown around quite frequently. So if you're a kid and you are trying to deal with the impacts of food insecurity, these are some of the things that you're going to see from kiddos. We also know that it's going to be hard for them to interact with others. It's going to be hard for them to focus, and really hard for them to develop. Children who went hungry at least once in their lives were 2.5 times more likely to have poor overall health 10 to 15 years later, compared to those who never had to go without food. That's a staggering statistic, and one that we really need to mitigate. So the effects of hunger or the sudden changes of hunger when COVID hit was pretty devastating. So firstly, the places where people could rely on gaining access to a meal were quickly closed, and not as quickly were there replacements that opened up during the pandemic. While we're all doing what we can, there's just still so much more that we need to do. Secondly, families knew how to access food at the food bank or in other systems, but they knew how to do it pre-pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, oftentimes things changed, And it was that lapse or that change that caused it to be a little bit different for them, and it caused a lapse in access for them to access those resources. Thirdly, when the pandemic hit, people and families who had not ever accessed these programs or systems before had a very quick learning curve to try and access these systems. It was hard, and with all the changes that were happening, there wasn't always current information readily available for them. And then lastly, between managing a budget before COVID and then having the sudden impacts of COVID, it just got really hard. We all, can attest to that, I'm sure. And then with the ability to not only manage a budget, and then some of our participants also were our frontline workers, and they were called to the front line to work more hours than ever, knowing that the resources available to them in those systems often had time limits or time constraints put on them. So what did Greater Seattle do in response to COVID? Before COVID, our model was very focused on youth meals, and that was our very traditional hunger model with smaller programs at our branches. We offered services to families and communities, but we really focused on offering those meals mainly through schools and other nonprofits. When COVID hit, we quickly had to change our model, and we knew that there were so many people in need. We quickly shifted to increase our meals served to 15,000 a week at the height of the pandemic, and have kind of leveled off to an average of about 12,000 meals. Our two new service models that we offered during the pandemic and we continue to offer today are grab and go, which someone comes up to the table, we place a meal on the table, and then they grab that and they're able to go back to their day, or door to door, where we place a meal safely at the doorstep or at a table by the door of the person who's receiving the food. We also knew that we needed to utilize our resources in a different way at the height of the pandemic, and so we took our YMCA buses that we usually are transporting kiddos to fun adventures around King County to transport meals during this time. We also looked at our Camp Coleman kitchen that are usually making a lot of meals for all of our campers, but it was not happening at that time. And so we made meals for our community during that time. And then lastly, our partnerships. I can't express enough how much we need our partnerships. We had the pandemic hit one day, and we were planning right away with all of our partners, how do we figure out to meet the need? How do we get the meals to where kids and families are at? And so this is truly what has allowed us to serve with our amazing partners, which you'll hear a little bit more about today. So here are some of the outcomes, and I'm really excited to share with you these outcomes. We have served just over 260,000 meals to date. And just to give you some perspective on this, we last year in 2019 served just over 215,000 meals and snacks. And so in just 6 months, we have exceeded what we served for all of 2019. So that just goes to showcase kind of the need that is happening during this time. And then again, with our partners, we were at 71 different locations to try to fill these gaps across King County. These were parking lots of churches, these were shelters, these were housing communities. Really, wherever that gap was, we were trying to fill that need. And then we have over 25 partners that we're doing this work with. We work with them on a daily basis, trying to collaborate with school districts to support as many meals in a day for communities, connecting with other community-based nonprofits to see how we can leverage their programming or their services to also allow communities to gain access to food, so that way everyone can do this work together. And lastly, since we've started, we've had great partners like Fair Start and food banks and restaurants that have allowed us to serve so many different meals in so many different ways. So where are we going from here? So, right now I think there's a lot up in the air. We don't know exactly where this road will take us, but we do know that we need to meet our communities where they live to make it as easy as possible to gain access to food while we continue to navigate these times. We also know we will need to continue to be innovative and think outside of the box to leverage resources with partners and also internally at the Y. Working together both internally at the Y and externally with our partners in our work groups will make us stronger and more responsive to meeting the continued changing needs of our communities. Internally, working with our Y staff to ensure we are supporting our entire service area in meaningful ways. And then with our community partners, ensuring that we're not duplicating efforts, we're finding those gaps, and we're working together to plan for the future. I'm really excited to now turn you over to Courtney Whitaker, who is going to lead us with some of our great partners and panelists today.
Thanks so much, Nicole. I'm so grateful for your work. It inspires me every day. Your commitment to closing the hunger gap it's life-changing for our community. So as both Nicole and Gwen mentioned, this is work that we cannot do alone, and I'm excited that we have some of our partners today to talk about the work they've been doing alongside of us and where we're headed. First up, we have Dallas Wood. Dallas is the Y's Hunger Response Program Director, and he's been leading out on this work for more than 4 years, supporting community meals, summer lunch programs, and providing technical assistance to other nonprofits as they try to run their own hunger programs. Dallas, can you tell us a little bit about what this work means to you?
Yes, thank you, Courtney. So as Courtney said, I started supporting hunger programs about 4 years ago, starting with some weekly community meals in Shoreline. The positive impact these programs had on their community was very apparent through the community's support and appreciation. I have always been lucky enough to never have to worry about where my next meal will come from. My goal now is that no one ever has to worry about this. Recently, I've been distributing meals from a local restaurant at some senior housing sites, where I'm always welcomed at the door with from residents eager to receive a meal. My team is always greeted with smiles and stories, cards and cookies, appreciation, and the always important question, can you please tell me that secret recipe for those black beans and rice? It warms my heart and brings me joy to be in a position where I get to offer my support to the community, where I get to help fill some bellies and relieve some worry for families. During hard times like the present we are living in, it is more crucial to provide resources for families in our community. Our expansion during this time, through quick and creative partnerships, has allowed us to meet more of the need, but there's still so much more to be done. I'm really looking forward to meeting more people and getting to serve more communities. Thank you, Courtney, for the question.
Yes, thank you, Dallas, and thanks for the work that you've done and the quick pivots that you helped lead for us so that we could be helping families, kids, seniors every day. Next up, we have Katie Escudero, who's a policy manager with King County Housing Authority. We are grateful for the partnerships we have and continue to grow with King County Housing Authority and our joint mission for providing services where residents live to decrease access barriers. Can you tell us a little bit about how the partnership with the Y has affected the King County Housing Authority and your residents, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get to answering that question in particular, I thought it might be helpful just to provide a little bit of background about the Housing Authority for folks who maybe aren't so familiar with the work that we do. So a little bit about us. We're a regional housing authority. So we serve the area around the city of Seattle. We administer federal housing assistance to over 15,000 households. So this is through the Housing Choice Voucher Program. It's a subsidy that helps participants afford to rent in the private market. We have about 11,000 households who are using this program. Public housing, which is really the focus of this partnership, we serve over 4,000 households in our federally assisted properties that are owned and managed by us. And then just a little bit about the population, the large majority of people we serve through these programs have extremely low incomes. So that means that they're making 30% of the area median income in King County. In addition to administering these federal housing resources, we're also significant property owners, managers, and developers of housing. We have an additional 7,000 units of what we call workforce housing for more moderate income households. And then in general, just what our population looks like and what I think kind of provides a little bit of information on why this is such an important partnership. About 30% of the folks we serve are elderly, 30% are people with disabilities, and 40% are families. Our largest single cohort of residents is children. We provide housing to over 15,000 kids a year. And then more than half of our households are headed by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So we really view housing as a platform to improve the long-term life outcomes of the people we serve, educational, economic, and health outcomes. So cross-sector partnerships like the one you're hearing about today are really not new to us, and is really, I think, why we have such an affinity for the Y, United Way, Fair Start, and our restaurant partners who are also joining us in this work. We recognize that access to stable, affordable housing is a really critical piece to people's long-term well-being, but it's not enough to fully address the disparities that exist among the folks we serve. And as we've seen borne out in the data that Nicole presented, and also anecdotally, these disparities are just only exacerbated by the pandemic. So to get to the question, this partnership has really proven to be critical for residents during this time. One of our seniors referred to our meal programming as being delivered by life sustainers. And I think that's really a major piece of what this program means for our residents. So this is, needed food delivered to their homes to feed the whole family and at no cost. And many families, as I think we've all heard, are seeing a dramatic loss in income. So it's critical for them to not have to spend as much money at the grocery store and not have to make the impossible choice of which household expense to cut to afford food. For a lot of the medically vulnerable households who call KCHA home, this support is really critical to their ability to limit their trips out in public. But I think it's not just about the help, but also I think it's about showing a profound act of solidarity with the folks that we serve. So for a lot of the seniors we house, social isolation was already a struggle prior to the stay-at-home order. And we heard that it's been incredibly meaningful for them to know that someone is looking out for them. And that the short interactions between the volunteers, as you heard from Dallas, and residents really have meaning beyond simply providing this critical need. So I think it's really clear that we're building new and stronger relationships together that we can build on even after the pandemic ends.
Great. Thanks, Katie. I really appreciate the partnership we have now and the growth that we're looking for to the future. I think that our working together has been, a great way to bring meals to people who need them the most. Next up, we have Matt Gurney, who is the Vice President of Enterprise Development with Fair Start. The Y has been working with Fair Start for over a decade in this work, and we truly would not be where we are today without the partnership and joint vision that we have had with Fair Start. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about why it's important to have strong partnerships across multiple agencies when addressing the hunger gap?
Absolutely, and thank you, Courtney, and thank you to the Y for putting this together. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. Just a little bit of context about Fair Start. We are a job training organization providing individuals with barriers to employment with skills in the food service industry. We do that in real businesses. Several of them are meal service businesses that serve childcare and shelters. And we've been doing that for over 25 years. In this time of COVID and challenge, we are seeing a whole new way to work and to address hunger, and it is really through partnership. We wouldn't be able to do what we've been doing without a strong partnership with the Y, with United Way, and a host of others. And let me expand on that a bit. During this COVID crisis, Fair Start has changed all of our businesses from doing catering and restaurants that some folks may know about to really emergency feeding. And when this crisis started, Fair Start needed to do a variety of things. We needed to identify populations in need. We needed to come up with new ways to source product. We needed to prepare food, and do that at a scale that we weren't able to do because the need is so great. We need to be able to store food, to transport it, and to deliver it to a location, and then get that food to individuals. And at each step along the way, we have needed partnerships in this to go from making about 2,000 to 3,000 childcare meals a day to we are now making 12,000 emergency meals on a daily basis. And that is through these partnerships. So I can go back through those categories that I was talking about and talk about some of the partnerships that we've had and how they work. I want to call out the city of Seattle, and they have scrambled up a lot of their teams to really support hunger early on in this crisis. So Human Services and the Office of Sustainability and the Environment really pivoted to try and understand the needs and identify ways to serve the community. King County did very similar things. And then partnering and collaborating with the United Way of King County and the YMCA, we were really able to take a broad look as partners in how we wanted to serve the community more deeply and where there was need. And so that was critical to our understanding of how we were going to be able to get meals to the community. And then sourcing, we really focused on Food Lifeline, Northwest Harvest, our typical purveyors. As the supply chain has changed and broken and continues to evolve, we are partnering in new ways and leveraging a variety of new resources to bring in the food that we need to serve nutritious, healthy food to the community, including YKids. Storing food and preparing food. We partnered with First and Goal Hospitality and Gourmando, supported by Amazon. Fair Start does not have enough capacity in our kitchens to serve all these meals or to prepare all these meals. And so we've really leveraged partnerships and other kitchens to get a lot of this work done, including storing that food. Transportation, another key area, and this is United Way and Solid Ground and Gourmando and so many other partners who help us deliver food from point to point and get it into the hands of those who need it. I do want to call out other partners that we've engaged to distribute food. Seattle Public Schools, Seattle Housing Authority, of course, King County Housing Authority are all different ways or different places that we've connected with for final mile delivery and to find those in need and ensure that they're getting healthy, nutritious food. I think that was all I've got on that subject.
Well, thanks so much, Matt. And certainly that is a tremendous amount. And it's so impressive how you guys have pivoted and expanded in such a short amount of time. And that is a testament to what we've seen as a partnership with you over the decade. I think that it is exciting to see kind of what happens when shared missions come together and we're able to really work together instead of instead of silos, side by side, to really make a difference.
Yeah.
Up next is Lauren McGowan, who is the Senior Director for Ending Homelessness and Poverty at the United Way of King County. We are having some technical difficulties right now, and unfortunately, Lauren is not able to answer the question. So, but we're hoping we'll get her on before the end. And so in the meantime, I think what I will do is I will move to some panel questions or some questions from you from the audience so that we can give Lauren a little bit more time maybe to get on. One of them I think I'm going to send back out to most of our panelists because I do think, and Matt, you started to, the question's from Matt and it's a Matt. So Matt, you did start to address this, but Matt Stover asks us, seems like an incredible pivot in focus pre versus post COVID-19. And what are some of the biggest practical challenges that we've all faced? And so, Matt, if you want to talk a little bit about that from the Fair Start perspective, and then Nicole, if you want to talk a little bit about that from the Y or Dallas, that'd be great.
So from a practical perspective for Fair Start, I think for this particular crisis, the ability for our teams to produce food in a socially distanced way and ensure their safety, the safety of our drivers and the rest of our teams has been one of the most challenging elements of the pivot to ensure that we can grow that capacity. So, I did not address enough how hard our teams are working and, how challenging that can be into this environment. We are being very safe and we have confidence in our systems, but that is one of the bigger challenges that we've had. I'm going to do a couple. I'd say beyond that, really having a unified understanding of where need is and who is serving that need has been one of the significant logistics challenges that we've had in our community, and we're doing a great job as partners. I think the folks on this call are an amazing example of individuals coming together to make sure that we're providing the right amount of service to the right individuals, but we have seen areas where there's a lot of unknown, and we have trouble trying to identify and move forward solutions without that information.
Thanks, Matt. Nicole, do you want to talk a little bit more about the pivot?
Yeah, that's a great question that was posed to us. And some of the challenges that we faced were, staffing, as our hunger team needed to grow quite substantially. And so understanding how to ensure that we're able to provide these services with as many people as possible. And then another big one was the safety, not only of our staff, but also of our communities as well. Really understanding how to keep everyone safe, how to ensure that we provide the services in a way that's meaningful and also safe for them. And so, I talked a little bit about those two different service models that we changed to, so that way we would be able to provide some safe and, access to food for folks during this time. And then, lastly, I think we started to touch on it a little bit, but funding is just a challenge as well. A lot of this work is not funded through a sustainable source. We have some, federal funding that we receive for some of this work, but that is a huge challenge. And so the Y really had to step up and ensure that we were able to provide these meals, again, like Katie said, at no cost to our residents and our communities, and be able to support them through this time. We knew it was important and what needed to happen, and so that's what we did.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to take another question that I'm going to address to Gwen. So Gwen, how has the Y started to develop a plan for the upcoming school year if school districts end up going fully remote?
Thanks, Courtney, for that question. That is, I think that's $1 million question for all of us, and we're working closely with school districts as they look to how they will function in the year. And part of that work is partnering with our 25 other plus partners that we have throughout the county in order to how are we going to serve youth during the school year, whether they have distance learning or some kind of a hybrid. And that is our ongoing challenge, not only today, but going in the future. So I don't think that shifts too much. But we will need to be looking to our large businesses, our government, our community members of how do we help lift up this work and ensure that all youth and families and seniors have meals, and that we can really reduce the food scarcity and hunger within our communities. And this is really something that this pandemic will have impact over the next several years. So this is not a short-term issue. This is really a long-term one that collectively as a community we need to come together.
Great. Thanks, Gwen. Nicole, we had a question about if funding starts to get low, what portions would get cut from these programs? Can you take that one?
Sure. Not an easy question, obviously, to answer, but definitely something that has to be looked at as we kind of move forward. And we would really look at all of our programs across the board, and the ones that do not have sustainable funding streams, like our federal programs, they have a sustainable funding stream. We'd likely have to cut the ones that we don't have those funding streams for. And so that might mean our senior meals or some additional community dinner meals that we're providing right now. But hopefully we wouldn't have to look at that. Hopefully we would be able to rely on some additional partners and other resources to do that work. But unfortunately, that would be where the cuts would have to be made.
Thanks, Nicole. I want to open it up to see if any of the other panelists have an answer to that one as well, is that it does affect more than just the why. It's okay if you don't, but does anybody else have an answer to what, where do the cuts happen when funding gets low in delivering these programs? Katie or Matt, do you have anything?
From the Fair Start perspective, we're continuing to innovate, is what I would say. And so as opposed to cutting, we are trying to address this by continuing to pivot. And, we had a massive pivot in the late winter, early spring as things were taking hold. I think the landscape has changed substantially in how funding is coming in. And so we are looking at how we can address things differently, and that there are some potential partnerships, deeper partnerships with Food Lifeline and Northwest Harvest for food product and reducing costs that would allow us to serve the meals that we continue to serve. There are some natural partnerships that we've developed, like as in the Seattle Public Schools partnership, where we're in conversation and we would be talking to the schools about what they're picking up and what we no longer need to do, and then addressing and ensuring individuals are getting the nutrition they need is the priority. And that's how we're doing this, is making sure that we're pivoting and staying ahead of it and making sure that folks are getting some meals.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Okay. Sorry, Katie, were you about to? Go ahead, Katie. Sorry.
Sure. I have a delay on my mute for some reason. I think likewise, I didn't mention, but this is like brand new work for us. We have in the past, we've hosted some after-school meal sites and things like that, but really to this scale of providing on-site meal support is pretty brand new work for the Housing Authority, and I think we're learning a lot about just our residents' needs around food access in a way that we hadn't before. And so we are also committed to pivoting, finding new partnerships, being scrappy and creative to continue to provide these services at a deep level. We know this economic crisis is not going anywhere for a while, and that has very real impacts on the households we serve. I also do want to point out that I think people are really resilient and have found ways to fulfill needs in their lives for a while. And so as much as we can elevate, our family's knowledge and wisdom in that area as well, and informing where we go from here is also important.
Thanks, Katie. All right, I'm going to send this one over to Gwen. Gwen, this is another one from our audience. How is equity shown in our programs when the needs outpace the resources available? It's a tough one. Gwen, you might be muted. I'm not sure. If
I
not,
am muted.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Nope, that was me, muted. Sorry. We're very professional here. Sorry. In terms of equity work, it really is about being in the communities and listening and responding to the needs that are present, as well as working with the multiple partners. So the Coalition Around Hunger Response does a great job of coming together, of not duplicating work, but how do you spread the resources around to serve as many as possible. So that will continue to be the strategy that we take. I think one of the challenges is the demand and the need when it comes to food scarcity and hunger, and the amount of resources that are available is the challenge. So we really do look for creative ways. So reaching out to restaurants, to other places that have commercial kitchens that can help with food preparation, as well as those supply chains that we talked about, and just the generosity of our community and major businesses to find ways for sustainable funding so we can continue to serve. Because unfortunately, when the funding goes away, that does disrupt the meals. So we really look to provide a way to keep those meals going, especially during this particular time of pandemic.
Thanks, Gwen. And this, I think,
can I add a little bit from my experience of
Sure.
what I've seen in terms of working with the Y as well, is when we were starting our partnership, we were talking about where we're seeing needs and where we really want to focus our efforts. And, we're a large county provider, and so we are seeing really disproportionate resources in terms of North County versus South County. And so we approached the Y about particularly targeting some of our properties in South King County, where we know that there's not as many resources that were being deployed to respond to hunger. So I think that was a really real example and way that the Y has been responsive to community need.
Thanks, Katie. All right, unfortunately, Lauren is not going to be able to join us, but I want to turn this over to Nicole Lau for a second to talk through the partnership that the Y has had with United Way of King County. I can say when I first started doing this work, Lauren's vision was probably the one shining beacon to be bold and audacious, to tackle this work collaboratively and with big, bold statements instead of little pieces. And so I'm going to have Nicole talk a little bit about what that partnership has meant to the Y and enabled us to do some of this incredible work.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Yeah, I echo exactly what you said, and would just add, the United Way team has been with me on this journey for food security at the Y since I started. I was so lucky to have them as partners right when I first started this work, and it has only grown since then. Quite recently with the pandemic, just as our partnerships have changed, they were side by side with us in providing this programming. They were on the ground with us. They were helping us identify funding. They were helping us identify gaps in services. And we couldn't do this work without all of our partners, but United Way has been the one that we have kind of been with through the beginning. I think together with the vision that we've kind of pushed forward with to end childhood hunger and expand that now to end hunger in King County, the sky's the limit. As long as we're together working for that same vision, we're going to, make strides, whatever it might look like, to ensure that we're closing that food gap for folks. And I think now, at this point in time, having United Way be our partner and knowing that they're able to quickly pivot and they have such a wide breadth of partners as well, and then pulling in, Fair Start and our King County Housing Authority partners, it's just a really great blending of partnerships. And, we couldn't do this work without United Way.
Thanks, Nicole, for that. I just wanted to let folks know we're going to turn it back over to Gwen to learn more about how you can get involved in this important work, but we will send the recording, answers to any questions that we didn't get to in the chat, and a survey to all of you attending today. So Gwen, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you to our panelists for giving of your time, not only today, but just in terms of being a partner for this important work. We so appreciate you. So we wanted to talk just a little bit about really the opportunity we have to end hunger. And as Nicole so passionately shared, that we have over 53,000 children who are food insecure in King County, and over 200,000 people, individuals with food insecurity. And we have this opportunity to really address that. Currently, we are just doing a drop in the bucket of a little over 2,400 meals per day. And even with our partners that we have, we are still just scratching the surface when it comes to really supporting this work. And so we are really looking to you and to our community at large of ways that we can do this together. Next slide. Thanks. So the way that you can help, this is the big push of those of you have asked of how you can help, is one is donate. You know, the sustainable resources for us to be able to do this work. Just to give you an idea, $1,000 provides 260 meals, or 4 nights of community dinners that bring people together, or a weekend food for 50 families. It does go a long way to make a difference in the lives of others who do not, who spend their time worrying about just where their next meal is going to be coming from, or just in terms of just serving their families and sacrificing themselves. Another way is to volunteer. We love volunteers, so we always are looking for volunteers to help us to serve meals and our distribution locations, and to help create weekend packs that we send home to families. Those are 2 opportunities right now. There are more that are available. We're always looking for volunteers to help us distribute meals. And finally, the third is to advocate. Please continue to write to your local representatives about the impacts of hunger in our community, the need for additional funding and assistance from our government to help us with that. As Nicole had shared, the dollars that we typically receive from our federal government is specifically towards youth. And so when we have a youth sitting there eating a meal, we're unable to serve the parent. And that is just heartbreaking. So being able to serve the whole family for that whole health is just critically important in this piece. And that is what we're looking to each of you and to us to continue this important work over the years. So we just want to say thank you so much for joining us and giving of your time. We are so proud of the work that we're doing, and we are dedicated to keep pushing forward in that. There is, you'll receive a copy of this presentation, but Nicole Lau's email address is up there to connect with her to learn more. We also have 3 additional impact webinars that are coming up this summer that we hope you'll join us to learn more about our outdoor education, about the role that we're taking in terms of taking care of children over the summer, and then our work around shelters and support for our young people who are most at risk. Thank you again for your time and for being a part of the YMCA movement, and together we are better. Have a great day.